I normally like to commence my Dhamma talks with 10 or 15 minutes of meditation, sitting with a fairly straight posture, taking a few deep in and out breaths, breathing deeply in, aware of the feelings as the breath comes in at the nose, down through the chest into the abdomen, breathing out long, aware of the feelings, abdomen, chest, nose. For the first few breaths we take deeper breaths, sending the message to the mind. We're giving interest, paying attention to the breath. Breathing in, bringing fresh energy into the mind, breathing out, relaxing, putting things down. Allowing the breath to become natural, ordinary breath now, still aware of the feelings of the entire body of breath, nose, chest, abdomen, abdomen, chest, nose. Gentle mental recitation can be very helpful for restraining the thinking mind, inclining the mind to be with the breath. In the Thai forest tradition, we're often using the syllables Buddho. Breathing in Put, aware of the feelings, breathing out Do, aware of the feeling. The syllables Buddho are synonymous with awakening, wakefulness, awareness. Suggests to the mind what we're aiming for: presence of mind, clarity, wakefulness, awareness. Breathing in Put, breathing out Do. If you find it easier to be more consistently aware of the breath in one of those three places, tip of the nose, or the chest, or the abdomen, you can observe the breath in that more localized area, still trying to be aware of the feelings of the entire in-breath and the entire out-breath. Breathing in Put, breathing out Do. aware of the feelings, put, aware of the feelings, do. And now I will give the Dhamma reflection. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namassāmi. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you. It's been a little while since passing through Kuala Lumpur. Happy to be here. When I was a very junior monk, ordained when I was 23, in those 53 now, 30 years ago, in those junior years when the mind was affected a lot by restlessness, doubt, the various hindrances, not doubt in the Buddha's teachings, I always had very strong faith in that, but doubt about whether I could live within the bhikkhu training with all those rules and all of that, to be frank, discomfort. Monastic life is not comfortable. And young men, just like young women probably, or most people, various types of attraction and craving that the monastic life precludes. One thing that I found very helpful was the contemplation of death and dying. The monks sitting on the asana here, we are all disciples of Luang Por Anan. Luang Por Anan's main practice, according to my understanding for the first 4 years of his monastic training, was recollection of death and dying. And he got very good results from that. Experienced a lot of peacefulness. I, many years ago, made a series of guided meditations on death and dying. I've done so much meditation on death and dying as a young monk that part of my mind has become quite comfortable with the idea of the body dying. And one thing that is kind of surprising to me is that I actually made it to be more than 50. There was a part of me that's expecting to die any moment now. And now I'm confronted with the possibility that, because there are several factors as well, it's not just a lot of death meditation. I grew up in an era, I remember studying, there's a subject we studied in Australia called Study of Society, and I remember being 14, and I remember our teacher telling us how many nuclear warheads there were, enough to kill each of us over 500 times or something like that. And then a few years later it was the ozone hole, and then Al Gore told us that the sea was going to rise by 1 meter by 2020. And so I've been expecting us to be fried by the ozone or the UV getting through the ozone, or flooded, or... And these days when I don't know what happens for you, I think the algorithms, I look at the news for 5 or 10 minutes. I don't know about what your news feed says, but my news feed says, economic collapse definitely coming in 2026. World War III has already begun. These kind of, the AI apocalypse. So the messaging is rarely optimistic or positive. And so there's been a part of me which has quietly been waiting, okay. And we train in recollecting the good things we've done in our life, so that when we die, as part of Chaganusati, one skillful meditation subject taught by the Buddha, is to train ourselves in recollecting the skillful things we've done throughout our life, so that when the time comes to pass from this life, we can go with a bright mind, we can call forth some of that merit to support us in that transition. So, of course, if a person is an arahant, there's no need to do that. But for those of us who are not yet arahants, it's a good thing to do. So I'm realizing that I need to bring a different, embrace a different practice now. Add another practice. Breath meditation has been a large part of my practice. Contemplation of death and dying. Contemplation of the body as made of parts, those parts being elements. Loving kindness practice. Devanusati practice. A lot of practices I have done. But one practice I have not done much of is being aware of aging in a way which is not contentious, in a way that where one just has to accept the nature of bodies and try to be at peace with that. And there's a bit of a middle way. We should support our health. We have to try to prevent chronic disease if we can, and keep a certain amount of mobility. But we also have to learn how to be okay with the vagaries of aging. It's interesting because we all have different character types. I'm probably a classic greed/faith type. And the greed type, we all have greed, we all have hatred, we all have delusion, but each of us will tend to have more of one. And the greed type, in their process towards purifying and training their mind, often becomes the faith type. It's like putting your tendency to appreciate sensuality and beautiful things. You elevate, evolve that to appreciate the good, the pure, Buddhas, Arahants, Pacceka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Devas with right view, etc. And beautiful Buddhist art. But with that comes an attachment to, there's still an attachment to beauty, certain ideas of elegance, gracefulness. And I was visiting my mum earlier in the year, and I was looking at her, and I could just see an 86-year-old lady. No elastin, no collagen, saggy skin, old age warts, sunken eyes. I mean, I love my mum. I was talking about aging, right? But I was looking at her and I was thinking, I don't want that to happen to me. Just being truthful. But if we live long enough, that's what happens. And in that occasion, my mother was my teacher. And I'm often teaching people, but on that occasion my mum was my teacher, because I was asking her, how are you doing, Mum? Just checking in with her. Fortunately for me, my mum is in pretty good shape. She doesn't have dementia. She's 86. She walks about 8 kilometers a day. She lives alone, she drives, she cooks her own food, she buys her own food. But I was just checking in to see, is she really okay? And I was happy to see that my twin brother called, my younger brother called, my elder sister called, and people check in on her. She's okay. She just went and had her, after 80 you have to have a yearly renewal of your license. And so she passed that. I actually gave her a nice mala, and she gave it to her drivers. I don't know if she was bribing him, but I believe she did pass the test. But So yeah, she's got sharp faculties, good memory, pretty good health. And I asked her, so how are you doing? And she said to me, well, you know what? Every morning I wake up and I can get out of bed myself, and I have mobility, and I can still eat. I'm grateful. Because there are many people my age who cannot do that. And I thought, yeah, okay. She's not the slightest bit concerned about her appearance, actually. And part of that is because, you know, she's had decades to get used to and practicing with aging. You look in the mirror, 50 it's like this, 60 it's like that, 70 it's like this, 80 it's like that. And so it was, you know, very nice. My mum was giving a pointer to ways to contemplate that give rise to gratitude. It is said that when the prince left the palace, when his driver busted him out of the gates, showing him around, that he saw a sick person, an aging person. They were like, what's that? That's an old person. Will that happen to me? Yeah. And it's said that the vanity of youth disappeared in the Bodhisattva's mind. And then he saw a corpse, and then he saw a samana. Some people say, various things you read, some people say it was a previous Buddha that had that experience. Anyway, one Bodhisattva who became a Buddha did have that experience. So, you know, we do live in a world that's obsessed with youth and vitality and peak experience. And just looking at the average age in the room, that's probably not your focus. We are middle-aged people who have to practice the middle way. And fortunately, we have a lot of instructions about how to do that. And focusing on what really is helpful, what really is important, and things to be grateful for. With regards to what I was saying earlier, the economic collapse in 2026, World War III has already begun, AI, unemployment, apocalypse. A question I suppose we can ask ourselves is, I do recommend, before I say anything further, I do recommend limiting your news consumption for obvious reasons. I try to keep it, I just look at the headlines and they're bad enough. But you don't want to stimulate too much anxiety. And at the same time, what if it's true? What if it is true? What if there is a global economic collapse in 2026? What if World War III has started? What if AI does cause mass unemployment? You know, just as a contemplation, what if? Then it's not trying to give rise to anxiety, but it's like the question to ask is like, what can I do so that if that happened, I'll be okay? It's like, it could happen, it might not happen. One thing I heard the Dalai Lama say was that once, sometimes attend His Holiness's teachings as well, he said, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. It's a pretty good strategy as well. You just give a little bit of thought to it. I think one of the most valuable things we can do is meditation practice. Because when we come to meditate, trying to be aware of an in-breath, trying to be aware of an out-breath, you will notice there will be thoughts about the first two hindrances, craving for certain things, the second hindrance, craving not for. You want more of this, and you want things to be a certain way. You don't want this, you don't want things to be that way. And just keep giving the interest to the breath, seeing a thought as a thought, but we do notice that there's a lot of our thoughts are about these things. Things we want, things we like, things we don't want, things we don't like. And a large part of practice, of course, is accepting things the way they are. So one of the upakilesa is contentiousness. So when we really can't, so oftentimes in life something just is the way it is. Suppose, for example, your daughter-in-law is a certain way, or your son-in-law is a certain way, and you might really think they shouldn't be like that. And you might come to meditate and think, why is she like this, or why doesn't she do that, and how come she always does this, and how come she never does that? That might be a frequent flyer in your meditation experience. It could be one of your children. Why are they like this? Why aren't they like that? And then, but there's another part of the mind which, if we're being wise, if we're cultivating truth-discerning awareness, mindfulness, being able to accept things, then there's a certain point where Ajahn Achalo often says, a way to stop the mind contending with conditions is to accept the way things are, and he often uses that phrase, it's like this. So it's like, I want it to be like that, I don't want it to be like this, it should be like that, it shouldn't be like this. Ajahn Achalo says, it's like this. And when we can cut through some of the contentiousness and be more truthful about what's possible, what isn't possible, what's likely, what's not likely, then we realize that we waste a lot of energy obsessing about our preferences, the way we'd like things to be. And if we have more truth-discerning awareness and more understanding of things like karma, things like people's latent tendencies, because the way, conventional reality, we think of people as my husband, my wife, my child, my grandchildren, my niece, my nephew, my in-laws. But in terms of like something which is more truthful and more accurate, each single being is largely affected by their most recent 1,000 lives. And actually, it's not your son, it's not your daughter, it's not your in-law. It's a sentient being who has karma and who has latent tendencies, conditioned by at least the previous 1,000 lives. And when we consider in that way, it's like, we might have our preferences, but we understand our preferences only carry so much weight. And the other conditions are more weighty. And so we can think in terms of the suffering that we have that we can't avoid, and the suffering that we add by being contentious and wishing things were different to the way they were. So of course, being able to accept things as they are depends upon a good quality of mindfulness. Having a good quality of mindfulness depends upon repeated and consistent practice. So I'm often saying to my students, or people who consider me to be one of their teachers, to not just meditate once a day, but to try to meditate 2 or 3 times a day. And not many people follow my advice. This is a part of the suffering of being a teacher, or thinking you're a teacher. People ask you what they should do, you tell them what you think they should do, and they don't do it. But, we do it anyway, that's our job. And I suppose if 1 in 100 does, at least it's something, huh? But what often people do is, if I'm saying meditate twice a day, somebody meditating half a day, they might increase to 45 minutes. Okay. If you can't add another session, at least meditate longer when you're actually there. Mindfulness is actually a condition. It's a sankhara. When Lord Buddha had his liberation and he was considering what led to his liberation, in one of the weeks after his enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, he had the insight, these 4 foundations of mindfulness, when made much of, when cultivated, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. So that's a huge teaching, suggestion, prompting about the importance of mindfulness. This quality, this leads to nibbana, to be qualified when cultivated. How do you cultivate good mindfulness? Well, this is where the I think the challenge for most Buddhists is not, the method is not that difficult to understand. It's like, okay, be aware of the feeling of a breath, in and out, aware of thoughts as thoughts, aware of feelings as feelings, know if something's wholesome, neutral, unwholesome. Keep doing it. The problem is, if we don't do it enough, we don't meditate enough sessions, or the session time long enough, or we do it sometimes and we don't do it other times, then the mindfulness isn't being cultivated, it isn't becoming good mindfulness. We might have some mindfulness sometimes. And other times, mindfulness might be weak and fuzzy and challenged. So what do we do to make the mindfulness good? This is the value of training with an actual meditation object. When you make the intention to be aware of the in-breath, aware of the out-breath, that's giving you the opportunity to see a thought as just a thought. Not I, not mine, not creating a world, not sending the world into the past and the future. So when we send the world into the past and the future, when we send the world out, the mind into the past and future, we send the mind out thinking about other places and other people. That is creating moment by moment a self in a world with a past and a future. And that is conventional reality, but it's not ultimate reality. It is bound up with ignorance and delusion and craving, which is the cause of suffering. When we give our interest to the feeling of one in-breath, and we give our interest to the knowing the feeling of one out-breath, and then we train in seeing thoughts as just thoughts, then we're not sending the mind out into a world, we're not feeding ignorance, we're not creating a world, we're allowing the mind to settle inwardly. And what happens is mindfulness gets clearer, mindfulness gets sharper. It becomes possible to see a thought as a thought, not be fully absorbed into it, not grasp at it, not carry on with more thoughts. If we can do that, if we do it once a day, what's going to happen, suppose you do it in the morning, by mid-afternoon your clarity is probably mostly gone. And if you do it last thing in the day, after doing everything else, then probably you're going to be tired, probably you're going to be thinking about what happened during your day. So it's also not very efficient. So the best time to meditate, I believe, is first thing in the morning. Establish presence of mind, establish clarity, and then you set your intention that I'm going to be mindful throughout the day. Mindful of my speech, mindful of what I consume. And then if you are more mindful throughout the day, you might not be quite so tired at night time, and you can meditate again before you sleep. And there's certain kind of guidelines that I would suggest. Is because these devices that we all have, even the monks have them now, they're addictive, they absorb your attention, they were designed to be by some of the smartest people in the world. So we have to set boundaries with these things. You ever notice that you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're answering and it's 1 a.m? What happened? So I suggest setting boundaries with these things, and I would recommend that you make some kind of a rule for yourself that you will stop looking at your device, let's say 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Just put it on flight mode, okay? People are terrified of actually turning them off. You know, to turn it off. Won't take that long to reboot. You just press the button and it all comes back. But you can press that button, it's not that hard. You know, the little airplane logo, you know. Scroll down, press, and it'll stop going bing, 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 bong, 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 ding, 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 dong, dong, dong. You won't know. And then when you're not scrolling and you're not being entertained or offended or shopping, you can meditate before you sleep. And then if you meditate before you sleep, you'll have a more restful sleep. So, you know, stop playing with these things, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, meditate, go to bed earlier. When you go to bed earlier, you'll find you can get up earlier, and then you have more time to practice. It'd be a good thing to look at. People say, I just don't have time. And I think if you have a look on your device, it will tell you how many hours you spent on it. And I think you'll find where your time went. Most people. So this is I don't know how many of you will listen, but it's my job to give wise advice, so I'm giving it. And nearly 100 people. If one person follows, then I'll be content. Train myself to be content with little, you see. That's a recipe for happiness. I met a lady recently. She was 80. She came to my monastery, and I was so happy to meet her. She said, "Ajahn, I meditate for 45 minutes 3 times a day. I've been doing this for many years." And I said, "I'm so happy to meet you." Because that's the advice I've given all my students for a decade now. I said, 'Cause normally people are asking, "Would you be my Ajahn?" On this occasion I asked her, "Would you be my disciple?" And she said, "Yeah, I'll be your disciple." And she said something interesting. She said, one thing she noticed from her practice is when she's not meditating, she's just sitting quietly, the syllables Buddha come to her mind. She says, "But other than that, I haven't really had any breakthrough, and I want to put an end to the cycle of death, and I don't have much time, so what do you recommend, Ajahn?" And I said, "Well, I would recommend that you increase the duration of your session, that you sit for," because she said, "I'm running out of time and I want to be liberated, what do I want to do?" I said, "Well, you need to practice more." So I said to her, double it, sit for an hour and a half, morning, afternoon, evening. She said, "I get so much back pain." I said, "Okay, well, you can sit on the floor for 45 minutes and then sit on a chair for 45 minutes. And what do you think she said? She said, "Okay, car." So I just say this to you for a bit of perspective. One human being actually managed this. And she came to me and she said, "I'm doing this much," which is already good, "and I want to do more." Why? Because, I think part of her bharami, part of her merit was she's living in northeast Thailand and she met many of the disciples of Luang Por Man. So she's heard these teachings for many years and had true faith and acted on it. And so she already has a good foundation, but she wants actual liberating insight. And I say, well, if you want an extraordinary result, you do have to sow an extraordinary cause. And it's part of my job, to tell you this. If you meditate for half an hour a day and do one 10-day retreat a year, I sincerely rejoice. You are rare among beings. But it probably won't enlighten you. Sorry to say. And if you want liberating insight, you will have to increase your efforts. And with regards to being okay with the world when if it gets more painful, if it gets more challenging, if it gets more frightening, this quality of mindfulness really is a refuge. And when you think about refuge of Dhamma, I go for refuge to the Dhamma. It's not 84,000 Dhamma verses in a bookcase. It's the actual practice. That's the map. The refuge of Dhamma is your practice. You're walking on the path. Your ability to have truth-discerning awareness, your ability to have a refuge in your heart, your ability to see conditions and not be contentious. That's Dhamma. And what's the Sangha? So even for the monks, it is a somewhat frightening time, a volatile time with what's happening with AI. It's quite possible in the future people won't come to the monastery to hear Dhamma talks because they just ask ChatGPT. People can now say, "Give me an Ajahn Achalo style Dhamma talk in an Ajahn Amaro voice. Just sit at home and listen to it." Maybe people will stop feeding us, I don't need the monks anymore. I got ChatGPT. We might be an endangered species, dying off slowly in the forest. It's possible. But at least for ourselves, it's like, well, what that might mean in the short term is having more time to practice. If people stop coming to the monastery to ask Dhamma questions, then I can get back to my kuti more quickly, walk on the meditation path. And so we have to, if life gets more challenging, we have to think, how do I turn that into my possibility? If people are unemployed for periods of time, okay, more time to meditate. So we hope I don't know, if you were to ask me if I'm optimistic about Buddhism, the future of Buddhism, should I say this? I don't want to depress you. Am I optimistic about the future of Buddhism? So in the short term, I'm not very optimistic. In the intermediate term, I'm more optimistic. I think the world will probably get pretty fascinated with this AI stuff, and people will get distracted, and then I'm hoping that there'll be something of a pendulum swing, when people see the value of actual human beings with lived experience. And from what I hear from some of the great masters of Thailand, in the future, meaning a couple of 100 years away, there will be a large Buddhist presence in Russia and in Australia. But they have said it's a couple of 100 years away. So what happens in the meantime, I'm not sure. But in terms of what is Buddhism, it's another interesting thing to consider. Am I optimistic about the future of Buddhism? Buddhism in terms of institutions, percentage of practitioners, not so optimistic. But how do you define Buddhism? Buddhism in terms of those people who are actually practicing, because that's what Buddhism actually is. For those people, I'm optimistic. So that's the part of Buddhism I'm optimistic for. Those of you who do chant, and those of you who meditate, those of you who listen to Dhamma talks, those Buddhists, practitioners, I'm optimistic for you. Things will get better and better. You will progress towards liberation. But for people who don't practice, I'm not optimistic for you. So I offer this for your reflection. I give people the chance to ask questions if they have any.
My question for this evening would be about Samadhi developed Panya versus Panya developed Samadhi. So in your experience, for someone who tends to overthink and overanalyze, and might find more Samadhi only after doing some analytical thinking or investigation into the Tilakkhana, for example, may I know how do we incorporate that into our regular, formal sits?
Right.
Thank you.
So in the beginning of my practice 30 years ago, I was also somebody who thought a lot and did have to use what I mentioned earlier in my talk, that I had to do a lot of death meditation, awareness of death, to pacify and calm the thinking mind. Now I would say I'm actually more of a samadhi samatha type, but that's 3 decades later. So yes, if you come to sit and you're trying to be aware of the breath, but there is a lot of thinking activity, then it is wise to train your mind to think in a groove, one theme of meditation that inclines the mind to be more sober, or so that the death meditation is good for that. It's like one of the things you can ask is it possible that I might die today? And often there's a feeling of nah, and that's an assumption that we have, and so you have to continue to when you look at some news and there was a car crash or somebody was stabbed or there was a bomb or a shooting or various things, there's an assumption that that will happen to other people, and so we do. It's skillful in that situation. If we're having too much thinking and the mind isn't becoming peaceful, it is skillful to remind ourselves this could be you, that could be you. Don't always make the assumption that it might be someone else. And so when we ask ourselves the question, may I die today? The only correct answer is yes. And then we can think, well, how may I die today? You can think through some scenarios, my brakes might fail. Someone might come into my lane. I could fall over in the bathroom if I'm in a hurry. And I think as many people die in their own bathrooms as on the roads, actually. You look at the statistics. People don't think when they're going into the bathroom that they're in the most dangerous place in the world. But if you look at the statistics, it is one of the most dangerous places in the world. Just a slip and the head hits something hard. So it, of course, has to be balanced with, like if you're sitting there thinking of all the gruesome ways you might die today, if you're somewhat prone to anxiety, that might not be very peaceful, It has to be balanced with the metta practice. So you do it enough to sober the mind, and then then also do some metta in the same session. So if you're sitting for an hour and you use death meditation to bring the mind to peacefulness, and then you know you have to go back to work or whatever, set a timer and make sure you do some loving kindness practice for the last 5 minutes. It's important to balance these different samatha practices. Yes, and over the years, if we're diligent with our practice, I do, as you know, I recommend more than one session a day. Because if we really have a lot of thoughts, it needs, significant pacifying to change that. And if you can meditate in the afternoon, it's like what it's saying is mindfulness is one of the most important conditions that leads to the unconditioned. And if we meditate in the morning, by mid-afternoon it is getting fuzzy. So if you can just, even if it's only 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but you make the habit of taking some time out to clarify that sati, and during that time seeing a thought as a thought, not fully grasping and not fully identifying with it, just giving the mind a chance to have a break from it. Then over a period of months and years, the volume and the velocity of the thoughts is less. And the speed with which the antidote reflections work, we also get more skilled at that. We get faster at pacifying thoughts. And it really does work, but the issue is it takes more effort than most people realize. But it really does work, but we have to do enough of it, and we have to be consistent. So I think I could say truthfully that Ajahn is purported to have some mind-reading abilities. And one of the things he said to me when I was a junior monk was, Western monks think twice as much as Thai people. And they really want time alone so that they can hear themselves think. And that's probably true. Although Thailand is changing, it's not what it was 30 years ago. But I think when I look at my mind now, I think 70% less than I used to 30 years ago. And that's specifically as a result of bringing the mind inwards and not following thoughts, not picking them up, not thinking the next thought, just giving the mind a break from thoughts. And then one develops an ability to think what one wants to think about when it's useful, not just to be completely pulled around by endless thoughts. So I have experience of seeing it work significantly, but it did take a couple of decades and a lot of practice. So.
Thank you very much, Ajahn. And just maybe a follow-up question on the themes for reflection. So Ajahn recommends just sticking to one theme, or should we customize the theme according to prevailing conditions?
Yeah, you have to look at the quality and texture of your mind, and if it's imbalanced in some way, what is the reflection that will bring it to balance? So, yeah. But in general, Theravada Buddhist practitioners, we're encouraged to have the anapanasati, metta, death meditation, the body contemplation, and buddhanusati. So when we recollect the Buddha's example, the potential for enlightenment, that gives us joy, courage, hope. We have the same potential. Anapanasati for calming, but then there's applying lust, we do the body contemplation, irritation, aversion, we do the metta. Obsessively thinking about the future, we do the death meditation. So. But there's all sorts of things, like you might be holding on to a grudge, might have self-aversion issues. Then there's the practice of forgiveness, becomes something we have to deliberately do. Right? And then when it comes to forgiveness, that's oftentimes a process. Like you forgive a person, but next week you're angry at them again. It's just the nature of feeling hurt and having attachments. So we forgive again and again. But it's a skillful practice. Abhayadana, offering freedom from fear, dropping grudges, the various things. So we have to see what the mind's affected by and apply the appropriate remedy.
Thank you, Ajahn.